Good afternoon and welcome to Unboxed Lunch. Before we get started, I wanted to note that this event is being recorded. I'm Jenny Williams, Associate Director for the Archives of American Art at the Smithsonian Institution, and we're thrilled that you are joining us for lunch. Jacob Proctor, the Gilbert and Kinney New York collector, will soon join us to discuss the newly acquired papers of George Picken. A few housekeeping items though before we get started. At any time during the webinar, you can submit your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of the control panel. Closed captioning is also available. You can access captions by clicking the CC button on the right side of the control panel. Also wanted to acknowledge that several members of George Picken's family are here, so welcome. We'd love for you to chime in with any comments or answers to questions as folks have them. Now I introduce and welcome my colleague, Jacob. Hey, Jacob.
Hey, Jenny. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am very happy to be showing or sharing the newly acquired Picken papers. And for those of you who might be new to Unboxed Lunch, this is a monthly program where we highlight recently acquired collections, which are unprocessed, so really just fresh out of the box, as it were. And this collection came to us last summer, I guess. But it was interesting as I was going through, I realized that it's actually something that had been in the works for a very long time. I found this letter, which was from April 5th, 1972, from the director of the New York regional office at that point of the archives, writing to George Picken's widow, expressing his keen interest in learning of records of the professional career of your late husband, George Picken. So it only took 50 years, but now we have them almost exactly 50 years later.
Wow.
So that was kind of nice to see. Picken is not an artist who I was particularly familiar with ahead of, but this is a really interesting collection, and it's particularly strong in the areas of sketchbooks and sketches and preparatory materials and things like that. So I'm going to start actually with that. Picken was born in 1898, and he grew up he was born in New York City, grew up in New York City, graduated high school in 1917, and pretty much immediately, I think, enlisted in the US Army. And so a lot of the earliest material in the collection are sketches and photographs from his years in the First World War, where he served in the American Expeditionary Force. I think I mistakenly wrote Air Force, Army Air Force in the little description of this, but that it was pointed out to me this morning that was I was typing a little too quickly, I think. So here we have a picture of Picken in 1917. I'm going to switch over to camera 2 here. If that comes into focus ever. Oh, come on. Of course, it chooses. This is also from that same era, and I have no idea why my camera is.
Maybe turn off the camera and then turn it back on. That usually will readjust things.
So annoying. Pardon the technical difficulties here. There we go.
There we go.
So here he is as a young man, 1917, Camp Lee operational room, which I believe is in Virginia. Here he is again. And so he becomes a sergeant and goes to Europe in 1918. There are quite a number of interesting drawings that he made while he was still in the US. This is why is this thing not working? Sorry, this has not been a problem before.
There you go.
Here, some of his bunkmates, I guess, or other members of his unit. This one actually says Negro tents at Camp Lee, autumn 1917. I don't know, I have to abandon this camera.
No, it's working. It's good.
Okay. And so there are lots of there are a lot of really beautiful little sketches that he's made of the camp, of the training areas. There are many of these, and they're really beautiful. They're all signed and dated, and usually they note where they are. This one says near Verdun, which is where he served most of the time in the kind of Meuse region of France. And their landscapes, and you can see here there's sort of trenches and barbed wire. They're really kind of amazing, and there aren't so many of these from to my knowledge from the First World War. There's on the way to the front. So there's lots and lots of these that are like super interesting, because he was very prolific, and it's everything from the kind of landscapes around where he's living and where he's working, up to and including there's a lot of you have what gets in once you're actually here, there's bombed out, shell, says French hangar at Verdun shelled, and he signs them all Picken AEF, which is American Expeditionary Force. The walls at Sedan, there's a machine gun encampment. Here's a sort of field chapel. I think maybe this one is why I was thinking about the Air Force, is because this is these planes at a French military camp. Here's an Allied military cemetery. That wasn't showing up. The autofocus on this camera is not our friend today. So in any case, there are quite a lot of these, and they're really quite interesting. And interestingly, as well, as I was looking through some of the correspondence, I came across a letter that was from much later, from 1943. And it's a letter from the War Department. And is this going to work? Oh my God. Oh well, I'm just going to switch back. And so what this is a letter from the War Department, and it says, "Dear Mr. Picken, under orders from the commanding general, I have been detailed to prepare a record of our wars, as drawn or painted by the soldiers who fought in them. Miss Antoinette Crouchard, of Crouchard Galleries, I believe, tells me that she remembers that you did some work in the last war. I should very much like to know about it, where it could be seen, whereabouts you worked, and if I could obtain photographs of it. So few artists of any distinction portrayed the last war that some of your drawings would be a most valued addition." And then it says, "Yours very sincerely, Private Lincoln Kirstein." And which I was like, wow. Many people probably know Lincoln Kirstein is most well known for being the co-founder of the New York City Ballet, but he was also, he was very involved in a lot of different, I mean, it's almost like impossible to kind of catalog all the different ways that he was involved in the art world, and the performing arts, and the literary world, and the cinema, in the middle part of the century. So I thought that was cool to find that. So once he comes back to the States, he's working, he starts teaching, he's working, he's doing a lot of commercial art, actually, and as many artists do. But it's cool because this collection has a lot of examples of his commercial work, which are really kind of amazing. He was a very skilled printmaker. He taught printmaking. He taught both painting and printmaking at seemingly simultaneously at Columbia, the Brooklyn Museum, Cooper Union, and the Art Students League, sometimes all at once, it seems like. There are some great pictures that I can show of him teaching as well, but there's, his work is, the work that he's most well known for are kind of cityscapes and, kind of industrial cityscapes, images of New York City in particular. Here's a sketch of New York. That's kind of gives a kind of a good example of a kind of classic Picken composition.
Jacob, we have a comment that Kristen was one of the monuments men during World War II. Yeah.
Yes, he did become attached to the monuments section as the war ended, among many other things. So there's and there's he did a lot of book covers, and I love that the sort of this kind of pulp sort of mysteries, but also more kind of highbrow, some really funny Sheehan's Mill, a tale, the colorful career of a lusty and flamboyant first generation Irish American. And he had he would make these kind of photostat, or I guess not really photostats yet, but these kind of, little samplers of his commercial work, which is great. And there's a lot of them there. It's really wonderful to sort of have such a robust collection of these things. And there's not only these kind of the book designs, but just lots and lots of interesting stuff like this sort of, is printing a business or a profession? And work for, sort of industrial publishing, the painting of galvanized iron. Sort of a lot of work for paper and printing companies. So here's a great, this is for Crane's paper company. So there's a lot of really interesting material of this type in the collection. And of course, he also did, he did posters for, selling war bonds, and a lot of different kinds of poster print work, as well as kind of more sort of mundane, here's a illustration for a marine, this is it's a boat company that he illustrated their sort of brochure for. And it's interesting, there's a lot of correspondence where seems like a bit of a challenge sometimes to negotiate the boundary between people who are pure sort of illustrators, and then people who are like Picken, who are fine artists who were also working in the commercial realm. He had his first solo show in 1930, and with the gallery, the Mary Harriman Gallery, which is interesting. And then he went on, he had a few shows there, and then he started showing with Frank Rain Gallery, which is a very prominent New York gallery in the mid-century, who represented Edward Hopper and Reginald Marsh and Henry Varnampour, and a kind of laundry list of sort of American realist painters at that time. But I realized this didn't click until later, that there's correspondence with Marie and her husband Averell Harriman. And Averell Harriman was at one point governor of New York, and then he had some sort of a position in Washington, D.C. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but this is I love this. The Christmas card from the Harrimans, undated, but I love the fact that their Christmas card includes, this is a 1905 Picasso that's now in the National Gallery. This is a Seurat landscape, which is also in the National Gallery. This is a Renoir. And then here's their dog, you know, and here's like some cigarettes on the table. So it's a very, quite a little time capsule, but so that was kind of how he got his start as a professional exhibiting artist, was with Murray Harriman, which is cool. And then he went on to show with Rain for many, many years. And you know, so here's the Rain stable, as it were. And you can see Picken here. That's Rain. There's Hopper, Reginald Marsh. Here's Henry Varnampour, Charles Birchfield. So this is the kind of I'm sorry, the angle is a little strange, but this is that was kind of his artistic peers, his circle. And there are a lot of really amazing photographs of him from around that time. Here's his official Frank Rain gallery gallery photo where he looks very severe. You know, here's another portrait of him. This one is a photograph by Yasuo Kuniyoshi, the Japanese American artist who was a friend of his. There's also some nice correspondence from Kuniyoshi. So there's a lot of good stuff in that way. Oh, here's what I was mentioning earlier about. There's a picture of him teaching in the galleries of the Met. And this is at the Brooklyn Museum, teaching. He's doing, I think this is it says on the back, it says lithography class. So there's a whole bunch of, there are a lot of these which are. So this is, oh, here's another good one. This is a funny one. So here he is at the far right of the photograph with Raphael Sawyer, who's standing here, Eleanor Roosevelt, and then the director of the Corcoran Gallery and the director of the Corcoran School of Art in DC. And I'm not sure what year this is, so it's undated, but that's kind of nice. I mentioned he taught at Cooper Union for a long time. There are some nice photos of him at Cooper. This is him with Charles Gwathmey, architect, and Ray Dowden, who was the head of the design department.
We have a question about the size of the collection, Jacob.
It's about, I mean, it always changes. I mean, because it hasn't been processed, it's hard to say exactly what it'll be. Right now it's 3 linear feet plus, so 3 standard records boxes, like the one behind me on the table, plus a bunch of oversized boxes with drawings and scrapbooks and things. The scrapbooks are really great, but they're really fragile, so I'm not even going to try to hold them up. But so it'll probably be somewhere in the 4 to 5 linear feet range. Once everything is kind of finished, we finish rehousing everything and processing it.
Okay.
And it's mostly there's you know, there's correspondence and photographs that I've been showing. There are a lot of drawings and sketchbooks. There are some nice notebooks. There's some great documentation of his work in the 1930s, doing things like, you know, he did some murals that were, this is 1936. So he was commissioned to paint some murals for a post office in Hudson Falls, New York. And so there's a whole bunch of photos of him working with a couple of assistants who are not named in the photographs, but there's enough research on this kind of WPA-era work that we could probably, someone with a little bit of time could probably figure out who the assistants were. And
these were actually on the head, Jacob. You have a question specifically asking about the WPA work, if there were any WPA work in there.
Yeah, so what we have, he actually did not, there's good documentation of two projects. There's this one that was in this post office project, which is still there. You can, there's actually in a different box, there are some more recent color photographs taken by his grandson, Niles Yeager, who was one of the donors of the collection. And then there is another that is from a school, a high school, or a public school in Hawthorne in Westchester County. And there's a series of murals that he did there. And I think technically these were executed as part of a Treasury Department program that was not technically part of the WPA, but it was part of the, the whole sort of, it was very similar. It's kind of part of the same effort, although it was not, I think it was administratively somewhat independent of the WPA. And we have, here, there's this folder which has all of his contracts and, correspondence and everything for these projects. So there's certified contracts, certified copies of the contracts for both of these projects, correspondence, things being, being approved. This is things with the Federal Works Agency, as well as with the Treasury. And there's correspondence from people like Holger Cahill and Forbes Watson, and the kind of the people who are sort of running the show in that department. So that's cool to have as well, and joins, again, like that's a big strength of our. We have a very strong collection of WPA-era materials from lots and lots of artists. There's also a lot of interesting teaching materials from his various classes. There's there are notes from lectures. There are kind of instructions just basically for how to make dry point prints, how to make lithographs. There are step-by-step instructions. There are things that are clearly lecture notes. There's sort of materials lists for students. There are a couple of, there's one very fragile course outline, which is incomplete. Put that back in its folder. That is from sometime in the 1940s, actually. And he continued to teach. I mean, there's some material from here's a notebook from teaching at Cooper Union, which has all similar kinds of things. So there's a lot of that. Oh, this is nice. There are a lot of there's inventories of work, going out to various exhibitions, both commercial exhibitions at galleries as well as institutions. There's some nice correspondence with artist friends. This is a letter from Arthur Dove from 1949, basically talking about, he says, I got to see your show yesterday and enjoyed it tremendously. Well, yada, 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 but I was forced to pass in the opening, but I had the compensation of getting my first look at your paintings in a gallery free of people and tobacco smoke. So it goes on and on. It's very, it says, hope to see you soon, Arthur. So there's this, there's another one. There's a letter from Stuart Davis from much later, it's from 1961, basically saying, Dear George, thanks so very much for your letter, RE the Times. This candidate really has been pot shooting at modern art all along the line. He has some kind of Southern fried snobbery in his literary style, and makes the Times art page look like it did 40 years ago. Best regards to Viola, who is his wife, Stuart. So there's, there's the usual stuff like that, which is nice to see. Here's a card from Kuniyoshi. Now there's a lot of, I should have shown this earlier, but there is a lot of, this is a, these are all postcards that he sent home from the war in 1918 and 1919, mostly to his parents.
Will you show us the front of a couple of those? We have just 5 minutes left.
So here's, this is interesting. So this is Ehrenbrettstein. And there's a drawing of the Ehrenbrettstein also that I came across earlier. This is a postcard to his mother. It's very hard to make out exactly what it says, but they're mostly, postcards showing, here's this is like the Pont Saint Georges in Metz.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's like annotations on the talk, mentioning something about we stopped over here on our way down to somewhere else. So he's sort of like editorializing a little bit about why he's sending these various things. Yeah, here's a view of this Anvers in Belgium. So there's a big, there's quite a little sheaf of these, which are interesting. I mean, it's just crazy to think about, that he was such a young artist already, off in the middle of the war. What else can I show today? Oh, there's some nice, I haven't gotten to listen to them or really read through it much, but there's also kind of, in addition to the kind of nuts and boltsy kind of teaching files, there's also this is like a 6-page sort of essay kind of about the visual language of painting and sculpture in the mid 1940s from his perspective, which is cool. And there are a few things like that. There are also 2 audio recordings. There's one, this is from 1950. This is a wire recording. This is actually the first wire recording that I personally have collected. And then there's another interview, and these are both interviews with him. This one's from 1951, and then this, I'm not sure what the date of this one is. I think it's maybe a little bit later, this one here. So those will eventually, hopefully, get digitized so that people can listen to them. Oh yeah, here's some more, here's another sort of, this is page 2 of, we're missing page 1, but maybe it'll turn up, of another text sort of statement, his kind of statement as an artist.
We have a few more minutes if any of our guests have any final questions they would like to ask. We do have one. Did you receive any of his paintings?
No, we and actually, for if those of you who might not know, the archives we don't collect finished artworks. Sketches and sketchbooks and drawings are kind of are one thing, but we do not have any of the paintings. Although I believe that our colleagues at the Smithsonian American Art Museum have a few of his paintings in that collection.
That is correct.
And he is also in, if you want to go, I don't know if they're on view, but in the Whitney and the MoMA and, various other, the Carnegie, lots of other museums.
We have a question just about the digitization of this. Will it be digitized?
I hope so. Digitization is complicated and time consuming and expensive, but we're doing the most that we can. I hope it's a good candidate. Sort of depends partly on resources and on demand, but there's certainly Once it gets cataloged, there will be a finding aid, and there definitely are sections of this that I think people will that will be, if they don't happen before then, that will be great candidates for a digitization on demand service, which is, individuals can have the contents of an entire folder digitized for a pretty nominal fee.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jacob. As you know, this time certainly flies, but we really appreciate you. It's been 30 minutes, but thank you so much for taking the time to go through these, go through George Picken's papers. Thank you everyone for joining us for Unboxed Lunch. I hope you enjoyed the program as much as I have. Support from friends like you make this programming like Unboxed Lunch possible. We would encourage you to consider making a donation online on our website, or you're welcome to contact me at williamsjl@si.edu. My colleague has entered in that information into the chat. Until next month, thank you all.